This is DawgNation's Countdown to Signing Day, brought to you by Kroger.
You love to see it, honestly, because there's just so much that can happen between now and then. And I think about the KJ Bolden flip, that happening on signing day. And we kind of had an inkling, but it was also one of those things like you really had no clue. And with this new era of college football and recruiting, it's like anything can happen, whether they're committed somewhere or they're not. And so we're getting to that time. So we're going to talk about some of the things that the 2025 class still needs. And I think that starts with the defensive line. You lose a defensive line in Stephon Shivers. Now you only have 2 in the class. Yes, you might get Justice Terry, but I don't really think you can bank on that. Who are some of those other options that Georgia can go out and get to fulfill what they need? Because you can't have too many defensive linemen at this point.
Yeah, Kaylee, when I tried to explain recruiting to folks, I had, especially this time of year, and everybody has that funny line where they say, recruiting is fluid. Well, and a lot of people pop up their social media memes, GIF, whatever you want to call it. And my version of fluid is when I was a little kid, we're all little kids at one point, right? You take that big rock and you throw it into the pond, you throw it into the lake, and all the ripples that shoot out of that, that's what recruiting is like right now. For instance, last year, Dylan Raiola flips to Nebraska. Well, that creates a little bit more need for Georgia to maybe go after a guy like KJ Bolden. I also think it creates more NIL collective efforts to go after a guy like KJ Bolden. But with defensive line, Kaylee, they're going to lose a lot. They could lose Terry Mingham Dawkins. They could lose Michael Williams. They can lose. They're going to lose Nazir Stackhouse. They're going to lose Warren Brinson. So maybe Christian Miller also portals, or maybe he's one of those running back guys. So that's already 5 names that you could lose off your defensive line. I think Georgia will try to replace some of that veteran might with the transfer portal, but I also think they have to do it with the 2025 signing class. You've lost your zero tech in Stephon Shivers. He decommitted formally last week. And then you've just got J.J. Hane, kind of a project defensive lineman who's only been playing for 2 years. And then you've got the superstar, 5-star, #1 defensive tackle in the country, Elijah Griffin. They're going to have to go hard remaining D tackles in this class. You got Justice Terry, the #2 defensive tackle in the class. Yeah, that'd be great. But if you're a Georgia defensive line coach like Trey Scott, give me more. Is it flipping Kevin Wynn from Florida State? You're hearing a lot of South Carolina and USC back and forth right there now with Kevin Wynn. Again, we've told you his story on Before the Hedges. He wants to be a chef. He wants to own his own restaurant one day. So if you're not talking into how he can seat some tables and have a lot of customers per hour and how to run a restaurant, how to set up his staff, kind of like that great show we see on, I believe Hulu is where I watch it, The Bear, and how to run a 5-star restaurant, and Kevin Wynn, he's not listening. You've also got keeping going on down the line. Georgia is in the mix with so many defensive tackles in the state. There's Braxton Hicks. There's Josiah Victor, who was committed to Boston College, who just decommitted. There's Christian Ingram out of Newton High School in Covington. So you've got to expect Georgia's eventual defensive line group in this 2025 class to probably go up to 6, 7, 8 names. We're going to lump in Chase Linton in there as well because he's an edge guy, a defensive end guy. You've got Isaiah Gibson there as well that's going to play on the edge, but another defensive line 5-tech type right there. But for Georgia, defensive line, that is the biggest remaining piece of the jigsaw puzzle right now for their 2025 class. Only 2 DLs. I think that number Georgia should sign and needs to sign about 4 or 5 more for that position.
I've got one follow-up, and we'll make it quick because it's pretty simple, but I think about something that you said earlier in the show, how Georgia, apart from Michael, doesn't currently have that first-round defensive line type guy. If Georgia were to go out and get one of those, is it somebody from the high school level or somebody from the portal?
Well, I think Justice Terry and Elijah Griffin are both first-round type guys, but we hearken the words of Kirby Smart really strongly here when he says you're not supposed to be able to play as a freshman in the middle, in the trenches. It is a grown man league, and I don't care how good you are at 17, 18. When you're mixing it up with 21 and 22, you're going to lose that battle. I think Elijah Griffin is that type of special player that can get some early run. I think Terry can as well to some extent, especially if he plays a little bit on closer towards the edge. I think Georgia's got to go find a Walter Nolan. I think they've got to go find the zero tech. Remember they flirted with Deion Walker out of Kentucky a year ago? I think Georgia needs to go find a guy like that. When you sign him and when you pull him out of the portal, kind of whatever it takes, that's a guy that you know is already NFL bound. He just needs that extra year before he is draft eligible. I think that's what they need. Listen, Georgia's front is always the best when it has a true zero tech nose, a guy that can soak up the blocks in A gap, maybe B gap, and let those linebackers come downhill. I think you just can't do that in the high school ranks these days. And as Ole Miss proved, they took a pass rusher from Florida. They took the Texas A&M former 5-star in the 2022 class, and they were ready to roll with a ready-made front built to beat Georgia.
So it looks like Georgia is going to try and add one more offensive lineman to this class, and I feel like that sense of urgency has come with what we've seen over the last couple weeks, and not just about the offensive line's performance, but their inability to stay healthy and how they need more bodies. So I'm not surprised they want to go after one more offensive line. Who do you think's that top target for them?
I think it's Saquon Miles, but this young man, Stankuski, coming out of Portland will be interesting. He's a Washington commitment. He's about 6'6". He's about 270, 275, 280. He's a little
Fits the Georgia mold.
Little light there in his britches, I guess. Georgia would probably like to see him like 295, 305, 315. But Kaylee, for me, I think Georgia's looking to see what they have. Marcus Harrison, who was very talented, signed last year, has been hurt most of his freshman year. Kaylee, then you also have Jamal Merriweather. Again, he redshirted. Bo Hughley. Both of those guys are progressing well, but they're not that 310, 325, monster tackle. I mean, another thing, I said the same point about the defensive line. Kaylee, you look across Georgia's offensive front right now, and there's not a first-round offensive tackle or first-round offensive lineman. The Dogs have been spoiled in the years past with Broderick Jones, Andrew Thomas, Amarius Mims, on and on and on. Like, they need one of those quote-unquote dudes up front as well, and that's what they got to try to find.
So, it's no secret. We've talked about it on the show today. Georgia is wanting to add one more quarterback in the class of 2025. Ryan Montgomery has been a part of this class for a while, but he's been hurt all season long. I can understand this need to feel like you have to go out and get one more person. I don't think that's Juju Lewis, somebody that we'll talk about a little bit later. It looks like currently committed to Cal.
Yeah, that's Jerron out of, first of all, we've never done this on Hedges, a young man from Iwa Beach, Hawaii.
Yeah.
He's from Hawaii. And Kaylee, he's currently committed to Cal, but Dan Lanning and the Ducks are flirting really hard. They got him in town for his official visit last weekend. He's now backed up his official visit to Georgia. It was this week. Now it's next week for Tennessee Tech. Best believe he's going to get one of those front row seats in your seating chart for Tennessee Tech. But he's a guy that's currently committed to Cal. Kaylee, I saw him out in California at the Elite 11. Major arm. He won the rail shot challenge. The rail shot challenge is where you throw basically the 9 route. There can be no floating. There can be no arc to the ball. And you really want that rail shot to go up the sideline. And you want it to cover about 30, 35 yards. And you want your receiver to catch it on a line right on the goal line. And I'm going to tell you, this young man was going toe-to-toe with Dylan Gabriel, a guy that's been in college for 6,000 years, the current Oregon quarterback. And they went through 8 or 9 reps. And finally, Dylan just tapped out and let the young man have it. Let the young man enjoy his moment. But big arm, Kaylee. Georgia also recently offered Camario Taylor out of Mississippi. He is the number 11 quarterback in the country, and he is committed to Mississippi State. Dual threat quarterback. It remains to be seen whether he'll visit Georgia. But again, we talked earlier about Georgia's trying to flip over every stone in order to add playmaking, in order to add a dual threat element to the class. That's what they're trying to do now. Camario, number 11 quarterback in the country, still sounds very firmly committed to Mississippi State. They feel like that will stick. I feel like Georgia's efforts, while they are noble, they maybe should have done those about 2 or 3 months ago. Because, you're learning right now when you come in late, sometimes not even the Georgia brand is enough to make people think, yeah, I've got to go in another direction here because the prettiest girl in town now wants to go out with me. And then we're seeing that a lot. Now, Georgia's brand can carry that. They can get that with a lot of guys at a lot of positions. But I think a quarterback's a little different.
All right, last thing, they're going to have to go into the portal to get some positions. I think for me, one of the big ones that stands out is safety, because you're going to lose Malachi Starks, you're going to lose Jay Jackson. Yes, KJ Bolden's going to move up, but that's still only going to be a true sophomore. I think you have to go get a safety out of the portal, maybe one more wide receiver. I don't care that Georgia has 5 signed in the 2025 class. I think you need at least maybe 1 more, maybe 2 more, and then you got to have some at the defensive line position.
I think you're absolutely right, Kaylee. I think what Georgia needs to do is they need to treat it like they've treated, and we'll have a discussion about this, the reason why later in our show, but Georgia's offensive recruiting at the wide receiver position, that's forced their hand where they've had to go to the portal. I mean, guys, imagine this, and I know it's football, it is what it is, some stupid decisions off the field were made, but imagine Carson Beck's offense this year when you had a Colby Young, a true X receiver, and then a Ra Thomas, another true X receiver. Both of those guys have NFL potential, they're big bodies. The offense looks a little bit different. Like you see a lot of the national folks pointing out, I think Todd McShay did this week about, listen, Georgia doesn't have any NFL receivers right now on their roster, at least any kind of like game breakers. There's no Ladd McConkey, there's no, obviously, George Pickens, but like they don't have that guy. And, you know, Georgia's tried to be aggressive in the portal, but I think they went to go find those bronze medal or silver medal starters that are in college football. They need to do a pull and move, kind of like what Texas did a couple years ago when they came and got A.D. Mitchell away from Georgia and brought them into their lineup. I think that's the move Georgia's going to have to make. Instead of a Dominic Lovett, instead of a London Humphreys, instead of a Michael Jackson, instead of, you know, the Colby Youngs, I think Georgia needs to go find a guy that is absolutely doing damage in college football. And they need to say, you know what? Come do this for the University of Georgia.
So I think in these last few games, one of the things that we've recognized is that there have maybe been some gaps in the last 3 years of recruiting. So in just a minute, we're going to touch more on that. But we want to remind you that our signing day coverage and Before the Hedges is brought to you by Kroger. And with Thanksgiving approaching, make sure to check out Kroger.com/promotions, because they're going to do 9 days of savings on all of your Thanksgiving favorites. So check out Kroger.com/promotion so you can see all the weekly deals, the holiday hours, and the special savings that will make your feast extra special.